Long before the first Oscar statuette was awarded, the American film industry had already undergone a dramatic transformation. By the early 1920s, Hollywood was no longer an experimental frontier for motion pictures. It had become a powerful industrial system capable of shaping culture, public opinion, and global entertainment. The rise of Hollywood began in the 1910s, when film production gradually shifted from the East Coast to Southern California. The region offered reliable sunlight, varied landscapes, and distant from patent enforcement authorities. What began as a practical decision soon evolved into the foundation of a new cultural capital. By the 1920s, Hollywood had established itself as the center of the global film industry. Large studios such as Paramount, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Warner Brothers, and Fox dominated production, distribution, and exhibition. This system, later known as the studio system, allowed companies to control every stage of filmmaking, from script development to theater ownership. Films during this period were silent, relying on visual storytelling, title cards, and expressive performances. Actors became internationally recognized figures, and the concept of the movie star emerged. Names like Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and Rudolph Valentino became synonymous with cinema itself. Despite its popularity, the film industry faced growing internal challenges. Rapid expansion brought competition, labor disputes, and concerns about quality control. Studios produced hundreds of films each year, but standards varied widely. There was no unified method for recognizing artistic achievement or professional excellence. At the same time, Hollywood faced external pressure. Films were increasingly scrutinized for moral content. Religious groups, political organizations, and civic leaders criticized the industry for promoting scandal, violence, and social disorder. Several high-profile scandals involving actors intensified calls for regulation. To protect itself, the industry began exploring self-regulation. Studio executives believed that maintaining control over standards and public image was preferable to government intervention. This desire for stability and legitimacy would play a crucial role in shaping the institutions that followed. Technological change further destabilized the industry. By the mid-1920s, synchronized sound technology was advancing rapidly. The transition from silent films to talkies required massive investment and threatened established careers. Studios needed cooperation, coordination, and long-term planning to survive this transformation. Within this environment, Hollywood sought to present itself not merely as entertainment, but as a serious art form and a responsible industry. Leaders wanted to elevate cinema's cultural status and create a sense of professional unity. It was during this period that the idea of a formal organization to represent the film industry gained traction. In 1927, studio executive Louis B. Mayer proposed the creation of an academy that would bring together key figures from different branches of filmmaking, actors, directors, writers, and technicians. The goal was not initially to create awards. Instead, the organization was intended to mediate labor disputes, establish industry standards, and improve the public image of Hollywood. This institution would eventually become the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. As Hollywood moved toward the end of the silent era, the industry stood at a crossroads. It had achieved global influence but lacked a unified voice. It produced cultural icons but struggled with legitimacy. It generated immense wealth but faced social and political pressure. The conditions of the 1920s, industrial growth, technological change, public scrutiny, and the search for respectability created the foundation for a new form of recognition. Within a few years, that recognition would take shape as a formal ceremony unlike anything the film industry had seen before. The Oscars had not yet been born, but the world that made them possible was already in place. By the late 1920s, the American film industry had reached a turning point. Hollywood was powerful, profitable, and globally influential, yet internally fragmented and externally criticized. Studio executives sought a mechanism that could unify the industry, resolve disputes, and present cinema as a legitimate cultural institution. Out of these needs emerged a formal organization, and soon after, an unprecedented form of recognition. The idea of a centralized academy was proposed in 1927 by prominent studio executives, most notably Louis B. Mayer of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The proposed organization was intended to bring together the major creative and technical branches of filmmaking under one institutional umbrella. Actors, directors, writers, producers, and technicians would all be represented, creating a forum for cooperation rather than conflict. At its inception, the Academy's primary purpose was practical. Labor tensions were rising as unions began to organize. Studios feared strikes and government regulation. An internal body that could mediate disputes and establish standards was seen as essential to maintaining stability. Public image was equally important. Hollywood sought to distance itself from scandal and criticism by presenting the united professional front. The concept of awards emerged as a secondary function. Recognition, it was believed, would encourage higher standards and promote artistic excellence. More importantly, awards could frame filmmaking as a serious profession deserving of respect, not merely a commercial enterprise. In May 1927, the Academy was formally established. Membership was by invitation only and limited to individuals considered leaders in their fields. This exclusivity reinforced the institution's authority and prestige from the outset. Committees were formed to address various aspects of the industry, including labor relations, technical standards, and artistic recognition. The decision to create an award ceremony was finalized in 1928. The format was deliberately restrained. Unlike later ceremonies, the event was designed as a private dinner rather than a public spectacle. There would be no radio broadcast, no dramatic announcements, and no suspense surrounding the winners. The first Academy Award ceremony took place on May 16, 1929, at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. The event lasted only 15 minutes. Approximately 270 guests attended. Tickets cost $5. The atmosphere was formal but understated, reflecting the ceremony's experimental nature. Winners had been announced in advance. There were no sealed envelopes, no surprises. The awards were intended to honor achievement, not generate drama. The categories themselves reflected the evolving nature of filmmaking. Separate awards existed for different types of films and performances, a structure that would later be simplified. The first award covered films released between 1927 and 1928, a transitional period marked by the shift from silent films to sound. This transition complicated evaluation. Some films were entirely silent, others partially synchronized, and a few fully featured sound. The Academy sought to recognize excellence across this changing landscape. 2 Best Picture awards were presented, one for outstanding production and another for unique and artistic production. This distinction acknowledged the tension between commercial success and artistic innovation. It also reflected uncertainty about how cinema should be judged as both art and industry. Individual awards honored actors, directors, and technical contributors. Acting performances were evaluated without regard to gender in supporting roles, a practice that would soon change. Technical achievements, though essential, received limited attention, highlighting the early emphasis on visible creative roles. The statuette itself was introduced as a symbol of recognition. Its design, featuring a knight holding a sword while standing on a reel of film, was intended to represent protection of artistic integrity. Though not yet universally known as an Oscar, the statuette quickly became the ceremony's defining icon. Despite its modest beginnings, the first award ceremony established several enduring principles. Recognition would be peer-based, conferred by members of the industry rather than critics' audiences. The awards would be annual, creating continuity and tradition. And the ceremony would reinforce the Academy's authority as the arbiter of excellence in filmmaking. The timing of the ceremony proved significant. Just months later, the stock market crash of October 1929 would plunge the United States into economic crisis. In hindsight, the first Academy Awards marked the end of an era, Hollywood's final moment of optimism before the Great Depression reshaped the industry. Initially, the awards attracted limited public attention. Newspapers reported the results, but there was little fanfare. Yet within the industry, the significance was clear. Recognition by the Academy carried prestige and influence. Careers could be enhanced by a single award. The Academy itself gained legitimacy through the ceremony. What began as a practical organization now possessed a powerful symbolic function. By defining excellence, it shaped professional aspirations and institutional values. The birth of the Academy Awards did not immediately transform Hollywood. Its influence grew gradually, but the foundations were firmly laid. An annual ritual of recognition had been established, one that would evolve alongside the film industry itself. From a small private dinner in 1929 would emerge the most influential award ceremony in the history of cinema. The period known as the Golden Age of Hollywood, roughly spanning the early 1930s through the late 1940s, marked a decisive phase in the development of both the American film industry and the Academy Awards. During these years, cinema became one of the most influential cultural forces in the world, and the Oscars evolved from a modest internal ceremony into a widely recognized symbol of artistic and professional achievement. The studio system reached its peak during this era. A small number of major studios controlled nearly every aspect of filmmaking, including production, distribution, and exhibition. Actors, directors, writers, and technicians were often bound by long-term contracts, which gave studios enormous control over careers and creative output. This system allowed for efficiency, consistency, and a steady stream of films released year after year. The Academy Award developed alongside this structure. As studios grew more powerful, the Oscars increasingly served as a formal means of recognition within a highly organized industry. Awards reinforced professional hierarchies and validated studio decisions, while also providing prestige that could be used for promotion and reputation. The transition to sound in the early 1930s reshaped the award significantly. Acting styles changed, technical categories expanded, and new forms of storytelling emerged. Films with synchronized dialogue, music, and sound effects required different skills and introduced new creative challenges. The Academy adjusted its categories and evaluation criteria to reflect these changes. By the mid-1930s, the Oscars had begun to attract broader public attention. Although the ceremonies were still relatively restrained, media coverage increased. Newspapers reported winners more prominently, and studios promoted Oscar nominations and victories as markers of quality. The awards gradually became a bridge between industry recognition and public perception. The Golden Age was defined by genres that became closely associated with Oscar recognition. Historical epics, literary adaptations, musicals, and prestige dramas often dominated major categories. These films reflected both studio ambitions and contemporary cultural values. Lavish production design, large casts, and moral narratives aligned with the Academy's evolving standards of excellence. At the same time, the awards reflected the power dynamics of the studio system. Studios actively campaigned for their films and talent, influencing voting through screenings, publicity, and personal relationships. While the process remained internal to the industry, competition intensified as the Oscars' prestige grew. World War II introduced new dimensions to both Hollywood and the Academy Awards. The film industry played an important role in wartime morale, producing films that supported national unity and documented global conflict. The Oscars continued during the war years, albeit under constrained circumstances. Ceremonies were simpler, materials were rationed, and the tone reflected the seriousness of the times. Wartime films often emphasized sacrifice, patriotism, and collective responsibility. These themes resonated with audiences and Academy voters alike. Recognition during this period carried symbolic weight, reinforcing cinema's role in shaping public understanding of global events. The post-war years brought further transformation. Returning soldiers, shifting social attitudes, and economic change influenced film content. Hollywood began exploring more complex narratives and darker themes. The Academy Awards responded gradually, continuing to honor traditional prestige films while beginning to acknowledge evolving storytelling approaches. Throughout the Golden Age, acting awards gained increasing prominence. Star performances became central to Oscar narratives, reinforcing the close relationship between celebrity culture and institutional recognition. Winning an Oscar elevated careers and solidified legacies, often becoming the defining achievement of an actor's professional life. Technical categories also expanded in importance. Cinematography, editing, art direction, and costume design received greater attention as filmmaking grew more sophisticated. These awards acknowledge the collaborative nature of cinema, even as public focus remained on major categories. Despite its growing influence, the Oscars of the Golden Age remained an industry-centered event. The ceremonies were not yet global spectacles. They were shaped by studio priorities, professional norms, and the cultural values of the era. Diversity in representation was limited, reflecting broader social inequalities embedded within the industry. By the late 1940s, signs of change were emerging. The studio system faced legal challenges and economic pressure. New voices and independent productions began to challenge established norms. The Academy Awards, shaped by decades of tradition, stood at the threshold of a new phase. The Golden Age established the Oscars as a permanent institution. It defined categories, rituals, and expectations that would endure for generations. The awards had become more than a ceremony. They were a reflection of Hollywood's structure, values, and ambitions during its most influential era. As the industry prepared to confront post-war transformation and the eventual decline of the studio system, the Academy Awards would be forced to adapt once again. As the Academy Awards matured during the Golden Age of Hollywood, global events increasingly shaped both the film industry and the institution that recognized it. War and politics did not merely form the background of cinema. They influenced what stories were told, how they were told, and which films were honored. The Oscars, while officially apolitical in structure, inevitably reflected the political realities of their time. The outbreak of World War II marked a decisive shift. Hollywood rapidly became an instrument of national morale and messaging. Studios produced films that emphasized unity, sacrifice, and the moral clarity of the Allied cause. These productions range from direct war narratives to symbolic stories that reinforce shared values. The Academy Awards continued throughout the war years, adapting to constraints imposed by global conflict. Ceremonies during the war were modest. Material shortages affected everything from sets to the Oscar statuettes themselves, which were temporarily made of plaster rather than metal. Yet the continuation of the awards carried symbolic importance. It signaled cultural continuity and reaffirmed cinema's role during a time of uncertainty. Films recognized during this period often reflected wartime themes. Stories of courage, resilience, and collective struggle resonated with audiences and voters alike. Documentaries and semi-documentary films gained prominence, acknowledging cinema's capacity to record and interpret real events. The Oscars thus became a forum where artistic recognition intersected with historical documentation. Following the war, political influence did not recede. Instead, it transformed. The late 1940s and early 1950s were defined by rising geopolitical tension and domestic anxiety. The Cold War reshaped American society, and Hollywood became a focal point of ideological conflict. Cinema was scrutinized for its political content and perceived influence on public opinion. The Academy Awards, though not a political organization, were affected by these pressures. The era of investigations into alleged subversive activity within the film industry cast a long shadow. Careers were disrupted, and creative expression was constrained. Films addressing controversial themes faced heightened scrutiny, while others aligned more closely with prevailing ideological norms. Awards during this period often reflected caution. Recognition tended to favor films that reinforced traditional narratives and avoided overt political challenge. At the same time, subtle engagement with social issues persisted beneath the surface, demonstrating cinema's capacity to navigate restriction through metaphor and implication. International politics also shaped the Oscars' evolution. As American films dominated global markets, the award began to assume symbolic significance beyond national borders. Recognition by the Academy became a marker of cultural influence, reinforcing Hollywood's role as a global storyteller. The introduction of awards recognizing foreign-language films reflected this expanding scope. Though initially limited in form, these honors acknowledged cinema as an international art. They also mirrored post-war efforts to rebuild cultural connections across borders. Political events influenced not only which films were honored, but how the ceremony itself was perceived. As television emerged in the early 1950s, the Oscars reached a wider audience. The broadcast transformed the ceremony from an industry gathering into a public cultural event. Political context shaped how audiences interpreted these broadcasts, reading meaning into speeches, selections, and omissions. Throughout these decades, the Academy maintained a careful balance. It sought to preserve its identity as an artistic institution while operating within a politically charged environment. Decisions were framed as professional judgments, yet they reflected the realities of their time. The relationship between war, politics, and the Oscars demonstrates how cultural institutions absorb and reflect historical forces. The awards did not exist in isolation. They evolved in response to global conflict, ideological tension, and shifting power structures. By the mid-20th century, the Oscars had become more than a measure of cinematic achievement. They were a mirror of the social and political currents shaping the world. Each ceremony, each selection, carried traces of its historical moment. As the industry moved toward new forms of storytelling and greater public visibility, the Academy Awards faced the challenge of remaining relevant while navigating an increasingly complex cultural landscape. The next phase would test the institution's ability to adapt to change, not through external pressure alone, but through internal transformation. As the Academy Awards grew in prestige and influence, questions surrounding inclusion, representation, and exclusion became increasingly prominent. While the Oscars were designed to recognize artistic excellence, the institution inevitably reflected the social structures and power dynamics of the film industry in which it operated. Over time, patterns emerged that revealed whose work was recognized, whose was overlooked, and how those decisions aligned with broader historical realities. From its earliest years, the Academy Awards were shaped by the demographics of Hollywood itself. Membership in the Academy was limited and largely drawn from the dominant groups within the industry. As a result, recognition tended to favor individuals and stories that aligned with prevailing norms. This was not the product of a single policy, but of institutional continuity and professional networks that reinforced existing hierarchies. During the Golden Age, representation on screen was often constrained by studio expectations and social conventions. Roles available to women, people of color, and minority communities were limited in scope and frequently stereotyped. These limitations were reflected in award recognition. Performances that challenged dominant narratives were rare, and when they occurred, they often went unacknowledged. The issue of racial representation was particularly significant. For decades, performers from marginalized communities were excluded from major categories. When recognition did occur, it was often confined to specific types of roles that aligned with industry expectations rather than artistic range. This pattern mirrored broader inequalities within American society and the film industry's role in shaping cultural imagery. Gender representation also reflected structural imbalance. While women were recognized in acting categories, their presence in directing, writing, and technical fields was minimal. The Academy's awards reinforced the visibility of certain contributions while rendering others less visible. Behind-the-scenes roles dominated by men received recognition, while women's contributions in these areas remained largely unacknowledged. Controversy surrounding exclusions did not always take the form of public protest. Often, it manifested through silence, through careers that went unrecognized despite critical acclaim, or through genres consistently overlooked by the Academy. Comedy, horror, and genre films frequently struggled for recognition, as prestige was associated with specific narrative styles and themes. The Academy's voting system further contributed to controversy. As a peer-based process, it favored consensus and familiarity. Established figures in traditional productions often held an advantage over emerging voices or unconventional works. This dynamic reinforced continuity but limited experimentation. Over time, these patterns became part of the Oscars' historical identity. Each ceremony did more than honor individual films. It contributed to a broader narrative about what constituted worthy cinema. This narrative evolved slowly, shaped by gradual shifts rather than abrupt change. The expansion of international cinema highlighted additional tensions. As global filmmaking flourished, questions arose about the Academy's ability to recognize work beyond Hollywood. While categories for non-English language films were introduced, they remained distinct from major awards, reinforcing a separation between global cinema and Hollywood-centered recognition. Public awareness of these issues increased as media coverage expanded. As the Oscars became a televised global event, scrutiny intensified. Audiences began to observe patterns over time, drawing attention to recurring absences and exclusions. The ceremony's visibility transformed it into a cultural touchstone where recognition carried symbolic significance beyond individual achievement. Within the Academy, debates emerged regarding membership, voting practices, and criteria. Change, however, was incremental. Institutional traditions, once established, proved resistant to rapid transformation. Adjustments were often responses to accumulated pressure rather than proactive reform. Despite these limitations, the Oscars also recorded moments of gradual expansion. Over the decades, recognition broadened to include a wider range of voices, genres, and perspectives. These changes reflected shifts within the industry itself, as new generations challenged established norms. The history of controversy and exclusion within the Academy Awards is not separate from the history of the Oscars. It is central to it. The institution's choices provide insight into the values and assumptions of each era. What was celebrated and what was ignored reveals as much about society as it does about cinema. As the 20th century progressed, these questions will become more pronounced. The Oscars would face increasing pressure to reconcile tradition with change, prestige with representation, and continuity with evolution. The next phase of the Academy Awards will be shaped not only by controversy, but by transformation driven by new media, new audiences, and a rapidly changing film landscape. The introduction of television marked one of the most significant turning points in the history of the Academy Awards. What had once been a relatively private industry ceremony began to transform into a mass cultural event, reshaping the Oscars' purpose, presentation, and influence. This transition did not occur overnight, but its consequences were profound and lasting. The first televised Academy Awards took place in 1953. The decision to broadcast the ceremony reflected broader changes within American society. Television ownership was expanding rapidly, and audiences were increasingly accustomed to experiencing major events from their living rooms. For the Academy, television offered both opportunity and risk, a vastly expanded audience, but also increased scrutiny. Television altered the structure of the ceremony. Timing became critical. Acceptance speeches were shortened. Pacing was tightened, and the event was designed to maintain viewer attention. The Oscars evolved from a formal dinner into a carefully staged broadcast, with choreography, lighting, and camera work becoming essential elements. The visual nature of television emphasized spectacle. Fashion, red carpet arrivals, and celebrity presence gained prominence. The ceremony itself became a performance, not merely an announcement of awards. This shift reinforced a connection between the Oscars and celebrity culture, expanding public fascination with stars beyond their on-screen roles. Television also amplified the symbolic power of the awards. Winning an Oscar now meant recognition before a national and eventually international audience. Careers could be transformed instantly. Studios and individuals understood that visibility was as valuable as prestige. The Oscars became a focal point of media attention, influencing marketing strategies and public discourse. As broadcasts grew more sophisticated, the ceremony's format became standardized. Musical performances, montage tributes, and carefully scripted segments were introduced. Hosts played a central role, guiding audiences through the event and shaping its tone. Humor and accessibility were increasingly emphasized to appeal to a broad audience. The televised Oscars also reflected changing cultural expectations. As television brought the ceremony into millions of homes, the Academy became more aware of public perception. Decisions regarding nominees and winners were now interpreted not only within the industry but by viewers worldwide. This expanded audience influenced how the institution presented itself. International reach expanded further in subsequent decades. As broadcasts were distributed globally, the Oscars became a symbol of American cultural influence. Recognition by the Academy carried significance far beyond Hollywood, shaping global perceptions of cinema and artistic value. Television coverage also intensified discussion around the ceremony's content. Acceptance speeches were analyzed, fashion choices scrutinized, and outcomes debated. The Oscars became an annual cultural moment, generating commentary before and after the event. This increased visibility brought challenges. Criticism grew alongside popularity. Viewers questioned decisions, noticed patterns of exclusion, and debated the relevance of the awards. The Academy faced the task of balancing tradition with responsiveness to public expectations. The televised era also reshaped the relationship between the Oscars and the film industry calendar. Release schedules, marketing campaigns, and promotional strategies increasingly revolved around award season. Studios invested significant resources in positioning films for Oscar consideration, recognizing the ceremony's commercial impact. Despite these changes, the Academy maintained its core identity as a peer-based institution. Voting remained internal, and eligibility rules preserve continuity with the past. Television transformed presentation, not governance. The evolution of the Oscars in the age of television illustrates how media technology can redefine cultural institutions. The ceremony adapted to a new environment, expanding its reach while navigating the tensions between art, industry, and entertainment. By the late 20th century, the Oscars had become a global event watched by millions. What began as a private gathering of industry professionals had evolved into one of the most recognizable ceremonies in the world. The transformation was not without compromise. Increased spectacle sometimes overshadowed artistic focus. Yet the Oscars' ability to adapt ensured their continued relevance. As new forms of media emerged and audience habits evolved, the Academy Awards would once again face the challenge of change, this time in a rapidly shifting digital landscape. By the end of the 20th century, the Academy Awards had become firmly established as one of the most enduring cultural institutions in modern history. What began as a modest industry initiative in the late 1920s had evolved into a global symbol of cinematic achievement. Yet beyond the spectacle of the ceremony itself, the Oscars functioned as a historical record, one that reflected the changing values, priorities, and structures of the film industry across decades. The institutional role of the Oscars was rooted in continuity. Annual repetition created tradition. Categories, rituals, and formal language reinforce a sense of permanence. Each ceremony built upon the previous one, creating a cumulative narrative of cinematic history. Through this process, the Academy Award became not merely an event, but a system of memory. The award recorded shifts in artistic taste. Early emphasis on grand productions and studio prestige gradually expanded to include different narrative styles and technical innovations. Changes in recognized genres, storytelling approaches, and production methods can be traced through the Academy's selections over time. In this sense, the Oscars serve as an archive of evolving cinematic norms. Institutional authority was reinforced through peer recognition. Voting by industry professionals positioned the Academy as an internal arbiter rather than an external critic. This structure preserved professional legitimacy even as public interest grew. The distinction between peer judgment and popular reception remained a defining characteristic of the Oscars. The Academy itself evolved as an organization. Membership expanded, categories were revised, and procedural rules adapted to changing industry conditions. While these changes were often gradual, they reflected ongoing negotiation between tradition and adaptation. The institution demonstrated resilience by adjusting its structure without abandoning its foundational principles. The Oscars' influence extended beyond recognition. Awards shaped career trajectories, influenced funding decisions, and affected the preservation of films. Winning or being nominated often determined which works were remembered, restored, and studied. In this way, the Academy Awards contributed to the construction of film canon. As a historical institution, the Oscars also reflected limitations. Patterns of recognition reveal inequalities embedded within the industry. These patterns provide historians with insight into power relations, access, and representation at different moments in time. The absence of certain voices and stories within the award's history is itself historically significant. The global reach of the Oscars further reinforced their institutional status. As international audiences engaged with the ceremony, the Academy Awards became a reference point for cinematic prestige worldwide. This influence shaped global perceptions of film history, even as it remained centered on Hollywood. Ceremonial language and symbolism reinforced continuity. The statuette, the presentation format, and the ritualized announcement of winners created a recognizable structure. These elements transformed individual ceremonies into chapters of a larger historical narrative. The Oscars also functioned as a temporal marker. Each ceremony captured a snapshot of its era, reflecting contemporary artistic trends and industrial conditions. Over time, these snapshots formed a chronological record of cinema's development. Despite changes in media technology and audience behavior, the Academy Awards maintained their core identity. The institution's longevity demonstrated its capacity to absorb change while preserving symbolic authority. Adaptation occurred within a framework of tradition. The historical significance of the Oscars lies not in any single ceremony, but in their accumulation. Together, they form a continuous account of how cinema has been valued, categorized, and remembered. The Academy Award became a lens through which film history could be interpreted. As an institution, the Oscars occupy a unique position. They are both participants in history and records of it. Their selections, omissions, and evolutions offer insight into the relationship between art, industry, and society. By tracing the history of the Academy Awards, one traces the history of modern cinema itself, its ambitions, constraints, transformations, and enduring influence. The Oscars stand not only as an award ceremony, but as a historical institution shaped by time, tradition, and the changing world of film.